Good afternoon, everyone. As I was sitting through today's discussions, I found myself taking a lot of notes. Not because all the speakers agreed with one another. In many cases, they didn't. But because certain ideas kept on resurfacing in completely different conversations. And as we come to the end of the day, those ideas I would like to reflect on. So if you have left some ideas that you didn't catch from the morning, let me be of service once more and summarize for you. One thing that struck with me throughout the day was just how much uncertainty has become part of the operating environment. We heard in the discussion with Leigh Brennite, where the focus was on geopolitics, fragmentation that we're seeing, fiscal pressures, and the implications of AI. There was recognition that many of the assumptions that shaped the global economy over the last few decades can no longer be taken for granted. The world is changing, capital is moving differently, supply chains are being reconfigured. Technology is advancing at a very fast pace. And while nobody can predict exactly where all this leads, there seemed to be a broad agreement on the resilience that is becoming one of the most important capabilities organizations can have. Leigh's message was simple. In a world that increasingly feels uncertain, success is not necessarily about predicting the future. It is about being prepared for a range of possibilities. Another idea that stayed with me was how often the conversation returned to institutions. When we discussed the political outlook, the government of national unity was described as a shock absorber. I thought that was a useful phrase because in a fragmented environment, and perhaps the goal is not to eliminate disagreement. Perhaps the goal is to build institutions that can be capable of managing disagreement without creating instability. That same idea, it surfaced over and over again, including in the discussion about infrastructure financing. One phrase that stuck with me was that success looks like implementation, which means we can discuss so many ideas until they are implemented. We can't talk about success. And as we know, South Africa does not suffer from a shortage of ideas. The challenge has always been execution. What builds confidence is not the announcement of reforms, it is the implementation of a reform. What attracts investments is not ambition on its own, it is credibility. Whether we are talking about politics, infrastructure, I found myself coming back to the same thought. Confidence is built when people believe commitments will be honored, projects will actually get done. The conversation then shifted to Africa's place in this changing world. Throughout the day, we heard about critical minerals, energy, AI, infrastructure, demographics, and trade. What struck me was that nobody was talking about Africa as a passive participant in the global economy. The question is no longer whether Africa matters. The question is how Africa positions itself in a world that is being reshaped. One of the panelists remarked that we no longer witness a scramble for Africa, but something that is closer to a stampede. Whether one agrees with that characterization or not, it reflects an important reality. Many of the resources that are required for the next phase of global growth are found on this very continent. A significant share of the world's future workforce will come from Africa. But several speakers also reminded us that opportunity and success are not the same thing. Potential is not prosperity. Resources do not automatically create development. Demographics do not automatically create growth. What matters is whether we build around these things opportunities that actually can materialize into growth. That was really at the heart of the discussions around beneficiation. The question is not whether Africa participates in the global value chains. The question is whether those value chains, we find places to actually participate. Will we simply extract or will we build? Michael Jordan approached the question from a different angle. He argued many of the things we think of as constraints can become advantages. He used a phrase that stayed with me. The constraint is the moat. For those unfamiliar with the term, a moat is a durable competitive advantage. I had to go to ChatGPT to check what that means. His point was that overcoming difficult conditions often builds capabilities that others often struggle to replicate. The obstacle itself can become the advantage. Professor Sachs challenged us to think bigger still. His message was that Africa's opportunity depends on scale. Infrastructure, connectivity, energy systems, skills and trade are required for sustained growth, increasingly need to be thought of or to be thought about at a continental scale. As he put it, Africa needs to be African, not 54 separate countries. That observation shifts the conversation from potential to capability. The opportunity is right here. The question is whether we can organize ourselves at scale that is required to capture it. Chen Zhao, coming to this summit for the second year in a row, offered an important reminder. Whenever something looks obvious, it is worth asking whether it is really that obvious. He challenged the assumption about both AI boom, the likely economic consequences of the conflict in the Middle East, and he did remark, the US economy is unlikely to go into recession, or the global economy is unlikely to go into recession. Oil prices are likely to decline quite significantly, and we don't have an AI bubble. Whether one agrees with every conclusion or not, the broader lesson was clear. In periods of significant change, it is dangerous to become too attached to a single narrative. The obvious answer is not always the right answer. And as I listened to the different speakers throughout the day, I found myself coming back to a single idea. Nobody used exactly the same language, but they were all describing different forms of capability. Capability to absorb shocks, capability to build institutions, capability to execute, capability to innovate, and the capability to work together at scale. Our final speaker, Bear Grylls, brought that idea down to a very human level. He spoke about failure, fear, resilience. Listening to him, I was struck by how relevant those lessons are beyond mountaintops and expeditions. The ability to learn from failure, the willingness to move towards difficult things rather than running away from them, and the resilience to keep going when outcomes remain uncertain. Those are qualities that matter just as much in business, in leadership, in nation building, as they do in survival. As I reflect on everything we have heard today, I'm left with a sense of the global reset that we are seeing is not a future event. It is already underway. The question is not whether the world is changing. It is changing. The question is how we respond. And perhaps the answer lies in many of the ideas we've heard today. Building resilience, strengthening institutions, following through on reforms, investing in people, and thinking bigger about Africa and what it can become. Because if there is one thing I'm taking away from today, it is that Africa's future will not be determined by opportunities available to us. It will be determined by what we choose to do with those opportunities. And before we conclude, I would like to extend a few thank yous. Events like this can only happen because so many people contributed their time, their expertise, their efforts, sometimes sleeping very few hours. Thank you to all of you, our clients, for spending your precious day with us. I know there's another conference in Sun City, but you decided to be here, so thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers for sharing their insights, perspectives throughout the day. Thank you to our host, Nozipo, for guiding us so expertly through the program. Thank you for our media partners for helping extend the conversations beyond these rooms. Thank you to our first round group attendees, our RMB colleagues. Thank you to John and Riza, and a special thank you to John for eating a bug. Thank you to the entire Mela team. Thank you to the marketing team, events and communications team. Thank you to all our partner agencies. And most importantly, thank you all for being part of the conversations. The global reset is already underway. The opportunity for Africa is not simply to respond to it. The opportunity it is to help shape what comes next. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Travel safely. Thank you.